Tēnā koutou katoa, and welcome to our postgraduate information session on education. My name is Sophie Scott-Elvidge and I'm the postgrad taught recruitment specialist here at the faculty. I am joined tonight by our Associate Dean Academic, Dr. Barbara Staniforth, as well as a number of our program leaders. We're just going to give you an overview of some of our programs, and then if we have time at the end, we will have a quick Q&A session as well. Just some basic housekeeping before we do get started. I just want to let you know that this session is being recorded. So if there is anything that you want to go back over, then we will send this out to you and you are free to go back over that recording. If you do have any questions during the presentation, please do use the Q&A function in the Zoom. There is a chat box as well, but we do ask that you use the Q&A so that we can go through those at the end if we do have time. So without any further ado, I'll hand you over to Dr. Barbara Staniforth to get us started.
Kia ora koutou, ko Barb Staniforth to Kuingoa, and I'm the Associate Dean Academic in the Faculty of Education and Social Work. And it is my true pleasure to be here this evening with you. It's always a bit funny in a webinar because we don't get to see you, but we hope that you're able to get a sense about who we are, because I think that's a really important part about your educational experience if you come into our faculty. Can you change slides, please, Sophie? So there are several reasons why we think that, that our faculty offers some pretty fantastic experiences for our postgraduate students. And I guess one of the things that gives us a lot of pleasure is the fact that this year, again, we have ranked 37th in the world in terms of the QS rankings for education. So if you think about the number of educational kind of faculties in the world, 37 is pretty darn good. And also within Aotearoa, we are number one. So I know it's not really good to kind of blow your own horn, but I think it's important that people have that awareness when they're thinking about where they want to study. So alongside those ratings come some really fantastic instructors. So you'll meet some of them tonight, but they bring with them a whole range of experiences in terms of both their teaching and their research. So we're very, very lucky at the faculty to have some of the best people in the world in their fields teaching into our postgraduate programs. So the programs you'll hear about tonight, we believe are relevant. They are focused on what it is that you want to learn about in terms of any number of reasons why you might decide that you want to engage in postgraduate work. Be that you want to develop your career and maybe gain promotion. Maybe it's about improving your practice in the classroom or as a leader in the field. Coming back to school, we know that when you're in practice, there's hardly any time to engage in reading and thinking about theory. And so coming back to postgraduate study really provides a really fantastic opportunity to start to link some of the really current and innovative research with practice in the community. And I guess the other thing that's a real privilege about coming back for postgraduate study is that you become part of a community of scholars thinking about ideas and being together with other people who share that love for learning. So again, you'll hear a lot about the programs that we have on offer. We recognize that it's a big decision that you have to make and that it will cost you in terms of time. And for those of you who still have a social life post-COVID or that it might impact on some of those things in terms of working during some of those hours. And I guess with great kind of rewards come sometimes a lot of hard work. So we recognize the sacrifice that people make in coming back to school, and we really want to make it worth your while, both in terms of time and cost and money as well. Thanks, Sophie. Could we go to the next slide? So what you're going to hear about tonight from Dr. Kane Meitzel and Dr. Rosemary, or Associate Professor Rosemary Earlham and Dr. Kay Twyford are about different programs that we offer at the postgraduate level. You will hear about some that start with the availability of a postgraduate certificate or diploma, and move into the opportunity for masters. And you will hear also about some that are at the postgrad cert and diploma levels. You'll see here that we have arrows that point down from taught. Those are indicating that those are not necessarily all involving theses or dissertations, but when we move into the master's level, generally we are looking at different options in regards to masters. And you'll hear all about the different flexible options that you can undertake. So without further ado, it's my great pleasure to hand you over to Dr. Kane Meisel. And again, thank you so much for being with us this evening.
Thanks, Barb. Sophie, I'm going to ask you to go backwards slightly and just go back to that previous slide so that we can just talk about a couple of things on this one before we move on. So as Barb indicated, that there are these taught components within the programs as well as research components within the programs. So before you move into the master's programs, you can choose to, if you're not sure about sort of signing up straight away for a master's, you can do a postgraduate certificate, which is just 2 courses, or a postgraduate diploma, which is 4 courses. And if you decide in doing those courses that you really sort of get the buzz for doing further study, you can choose to transfer those courses toward your master's, as long as you do that before you actually graduate. So it's really important to talk to advisors and make sure that you do get advice if you are considering shifting. And Sophie is a great person to talk to about those sorts of decisions, as well as people like myself. One other just little thing that I've noticed that is not quite right is the Master of Education practice, which we'll talk about in a little more detail in a couple of slides, is a fully taught program. So there's no research thesis or dissertation in that program. Can we jump 2 slides, please, Sophie? So it is a little bit tricky. We do have a number of different programs within the faculty, so it can be quite hard to sort of make a decision about which one is right for you. So that's why we'll talk about each of these in a little bit of detail so that you can sort of get a sense of what the different focus for each one is and which one is more a fit for what you're interested in. I'll be talking about the first 3, and then I'll be handing over to Kay to talk about the Master of Educational Leadership. So the Master of Education is our sort of most mainstream, so to speak, program. It was one of the earlier programs. It's 1.5 years full-time or 3 years part-time. Most students will enter through this left, the middle column. So those are students that haven't done previous postgraduate studies. So this is their sort of entry into postgraduate. But as I said, if you've done a postgraduate certificate and you want to change, then you can transfer that over, and that then becomes part of the 1.5 years full-time. So the key component of the Master of Education is that it's sort of the most focused on research of the different education programs. Half of the points value is allocated to research. It does provide entry into the doctoral program. You need to have a reasonable level from your previous study. So the GPA requirement is 5, which is equivalent to a B average from your undergraduate study. The taught component and structure there is the 2 times 30 point. So basically that's 2 content courses, and each of those courses with 30 points, that means you would only do 2 in 1 semester, would be full-time. Or if you were part-time, you would just take 1 course per semester. You'd also need to do a research methods course before you, ideally before you complete or start your research thesis. And you would have a supervisor that would work closely with you in doing that research component. Finding a supervisor is something that I would really recommend that people start quite early. So, it's not something to panic about. It's not something that you need before you sign up, but it is something that you should be sort of thinking about as you're going through your first course, putting out some feelers, emailing different possible supervisors to sort of gauge their interest and potential alignment with your own research and as well as their expertise. So this, sorry, Sophie, still. So the right-hand column is for people that have done a complete postgraduate diploma. So that's a full year of taught courses, or if they've done a Bachelor of Education honours, and they must also have done a research methods course throughout that earlier study. In this case, you would be doing a research thesis only. So that would be a 1 year full-time research study or 2 years part-time. And that would also give you the Master of Education qualification. Now the next one. Thank you. So the Master of Professional Studies is more of an expedited master's. But one of the really important things about the Master of Professional Studies is that it recognises your experience from teaching. So if you have at least 4 years bachelor degree or bachelor's plus a graduate diploma of teaching, as well as 3 years teaching experience, then this is a master's program that you can take that gives you the qualification within 1 year full-time, 2 years part-time. It's very similar in structure in terms of being balanced. So it's got both taught and research, but it is that sort of shorter overall program. The great thing is that it does still allow you to continue into doctoral studies. It's a smaller research component. The overall cost is obviously less because the total points value is smaller. You do, as I've said, need teaching experience to enroll in this. One of the little pieces of guidance I would just note for those that do consider this program, while you can take it full time, if you're doing the research dissertation, 1 semester is very difficult to do a dissertation, and if you are going through the ethics process. If you are working with a supervisor that's proposing something else, that doesn't require ethics, that doesn't require you to collect your own data, that's perfectly appropriate for a 60-point dissertation. That can be achieved quite successfully within a 1 semester program. But if you are really keen on collecting your own data, I'd strongly advise that you do it part-time so that you have a full year. And finally, the Master of Education Practice is our fully taught program. So there's no research component in this program at all. So that's attractive for people that know that that's not something that they're really interested in undertaking. You do need to be a qualified teacher. It does mean, because it is a taught program, you can't continue on to doctoral studies. So if you're keen to keep that pathway maybe open, obviously you don't sort of want to necessarily decide that straight away, then one of the other programs might be more appropriate. But if you know that that's sort of the pathway that you're on, and you're wanting to upskill to learn things that are really relevant to your practice, then it's a great program for that kind of objective. Again, similar to the postgraduate certificate, if you get in part way and you've done a couple of courses and you discover that you're actually doing extremely well, you've got A's and you sort of think, hey, I'd really like to actually consider transferring to a research pathway, that is something that you can also discuss. And in many cases, we can apply both of the courses with no overall cost in terms of loss of time or money. But it is important to talk to us about that. Sort of by the time you finish your second course, ideally. Otherwise, you're more likely to need to make up extra points. So this middle pathway, the 120 points 1 year full-time, is for people that come in with graduate or postgraduate diploma, a Bachelor of Honours, a Bachelor of Education, as well as 1 or 2 years of teaching experience. So there's really very little difference between these two pathways other than the entrance. So depending on what you have at entry will determine whether you need to do 120 points for this qualification or 180 points. And the only difference is that you get to choose an extra 2 courses, 2 content-related courses in the larger program. So just a brief summary of the kind of key differences between them. So the Master of Education, they're really, you know, there is the 1 to 1.5 years for each of these 3 master's programs. The Master of Education has the large research component, whereas the Master of Professional Studies has a smaller component. The Master of Education practice doesn't have any research component. As a result, you can't continue into the doctoral program. The other 2 you can. The Master of Professional Studies and the Master of Education practice, you need to be a qualified teacher. And I will hand over to Kay to discuss the educational leadership programs.
Thanks, Kane. Tēnā koutou katoa. And I just want to say that the Educational Leadership Masters builds on and is a kind of a subset from what Kane's already said. The same ideas of taught and research and certificates and diplomas all fit with this. But the Educational Leadership Masters is aimed at school leadership. It's aimed at promoting leadership so we can improve outcomes for learners, as well as advancing your own career. So just like the last one Kane was talking about, you do need a teaching qualification, you need a bachelor's degree with your 5 GPA, and you also need 3 years practical experience with some leadership in there. So, and that's really to make the course relevant and authentic for you, because you're being asked to bring a theory to practice. And so it is a real strength that you need to have that leadership background as well. So let's have a look. So the Masters of Educational Leadership has 2 pathways. There's just like Kane was saying, there's a taught pathway and a research pathway. Whether you do it with the faculty or the new program, Auckland Online. So I'll start with the faculty program, and that's where you can choose whether you do research or taught, and it's a 180 point. It can have, if it's taught, it's 6 papers, it's online delivery or face-to-face on the Epsom campus. It's 1.5 to 2 years full-time or longer part-time, and so you can spread it out. And if you're working, you really need to be doing it part-time. There's a lot of work to get the most out of the program. So that's a piece of advice there, that it's definitely too hard to do it more than part-time if you're working. With the, a bit more about just back a little bit, Sophie, please. So with the research component, you choose to do a 90-point research project. So that's the equivalent of 3 papers. So part-time, that would be for 1.5 years, and it allows you to get really stuck in and into something that interests you and usually relevant to your practice. So that's a really good point about it. And you can carry on. It's a way of thinking about carrying on to PhD doctoral studies, which you mightn't be thinking of at the time, but it's amazing how you can come back and look at it like me after many, many years of teaching. The taught program at the faculty is 6 papers. Now that one doesn't go on to doctoral study, but if you include a research methods paper in there, there are bridging ways further down the field where you could, if needed, get into EDD and possibly PhD, depending on your grades. So that would involve doing a supervised research project to show that you understand how to do research. The taught program, the other taught program is through Auckland Online. So thanks, Sophie. So the Auckland Online program is 6 papers, and it's a set program. You follow through the papers on a rotation, and you start where the rotation is up to. So this semester, educational leadership is the paper everyone's doing, and then they follow through. And the Auckland Online approach allows you to get to know your cohort. So you work closely with your cohort, and so you can build community and make friends and networks. The courses are aimed at leadership. There's a very deliberate leadership focus. And even in the communities of learning, it's looking at developing leadership for collaboration of equity. You've got policy and organisations, understanding policy appropriate for school and being able to critique it. The mentoring professionals is a paper that's focusing on, as a leader, how do you introduce coaching and how do you make it coherent with the other things going on in your school. So it's a 2-year, pretty intense program. You do 3 papers a year, 1 semester 1, 1 semester 2, and then a 9-week summer school paper. So there's not many breaks, and it's hard work. That's all I'll say. But it's from those that we've had our first group graduate, and it's impressive. It's a worthwhile qualification. So the Ed leadership, where can it take you? It can take you anywhere across any of the sectors. Within the program, you can choose whether you're focusing on secondary, tertiary, ECE, and your assignments, you can choose to focus on your practice to keep it relevant and authentic. You can even go into policy, research, learning facilitators. The opportunities are pretty broad out there for the qualification, and it's well respected across New Zealand, and we've got a growing number of students, school leaders, taking the program. So that's where it can take you. And I suggest, before I pass over to Rosemary, if you've got questions about the specifics, talk to an advisor. Like Kane said, they can advise you in a conversation about where your energies are best suited, whether it's the Masters of Ed or the Masters of Educational Leadership and the other programs Kane talked about. So Rosemary.
Talofa lava o lo'o ingoa o Rosemary. Welcome to Samoan Language Week, everybody. My passion is languages and language teaching, and I would like to introduce you to a new qualification where we taught it for the first time last year. So we still have students completing this qualification, the Postgraduate Certificate and Diploma in Teaching Linguistically Diverse Learners. You might think, oh my goodness, what does that mean? Well, it replaces the graduate diploma in teaching English in schools to speakers of other languages. So who are the people that might do our postgraduate certificate diploma in teaching linguistically diverse learners? They are teachers in all curriculum areas and all teaching contexts who have learners from other language backgrounds in their classes. I was looking at the 2018 census figures for Auckland yesterday, and there in Auckland, there are 56% of people who are from European backgrounds. So that's 46% of people from Pacifica, Maori, and Asians and other speaking backgrounds, other language speaking backgrounds. So Auckland is incredibly multicultural and incredibly multilingual. And that's something we really want to celebrate. That's a wonderful asset that a child brings to the classroom, to come from a different, an additional language background, additional cultural background. But of course, we want them to flourish in the classroom. And research shows that English language learners, they do best when they are allowed to be in mainstream classrooms with their peers, and when they have support, the support that they need in terms of language to be able to access the curriculum content. And so this is what we aim to do in this qualification, is give teachers the skills to teach these English language learners, but also to help these learners, to also stress to them the importance of them maintaining fluency and proficiency in their heritage languages. That's something that we are also very passionate about. So what do you need to do if we move on to the next slide, please, Sophie. This is a qualification that has 2 tiers. So it can be completed as a postgraduate certificate, 2 years part-time, and there are 2 core courses which are delivered over 2 years in weekly lectures or workshops. And for most of our students, the core courses are funded by Ministry of Education TESOL scholarships, which we'll talk about in a minute. We hope that most of our students will be so inspired by our core courses that they will want to go on and complete the diploma, which is another 2 elective courses, most of which are probably taught in the school holidays and on Saturdays, or maybe even at summer school. And of course, with the postgraduate diploma, teachers are very well placed to be able to be agents of change in their school, to be able to take over leadership positions for English language learners. I will also say I've made quite an emphasis about mainstream teachers. So at the moment we have teachers of maths and science, physical education in our program, but we also have teachers that are dedicated to teaching English as a second language as well. Either at times withdrawing students, particularly students who are new to English and to New Zealand schools, or supporting teachers in mainstream classes. Next slide, please, Sophie. So if you are interested in our program, you will be a registered teacher with 2 years professional experience in a New Zealand early childhood centre, primary or secondary context. And the next slide, I mentioned that the Ministry of Education provide funding support. And so most of our students have TESOL scholarships, which cover the core courses. But usually there is funding available for for the electives as well, or for funding for some of the tuition fees for the elective courses. So Sophie, I think now you are going to move on and talk more about funding. So I'd just like to introduce you now, or hand you back to Sophie.
Thank you, Rosemary, and thank you everyone for that. That's been really interesting. So before we go into the funding options, I'll just give a quick reminder that if you do have any questions as we move through, please do use the Q&A function, and we can get to those ones at the end. So we have a number of different funding options at the faculty. Some students will apply for StudyLink, but in addition to that, we do have University of Auckland postgraduate scholarships, and those are divided into general scholarships, Māori, Pacific, and international. In addition to that, we do have guaranteed scholarships as well. Those are for high achieving students, and those are for postgraduate research or doctoral programs. So if you have a GPA of 8 or higher, you have a guaranteed scholarship for those programs. There are also a number of fee subsidy agreements. So we have practicum placement subsidies. So if you are an associate teacher, if you have hosted our students, then we do have a couple of different options for you for fee subsidy agreements as well. So always good to get in touch if you do think that you might be eligible for any of those. And hopefully you have heard something tonight from our lovely program leaders that has inspired you to take that next step. All of the applications are initially done online. So in the first instance, the first step is to go to the main University of Auckland website. There's a big banner up the top that says apply now. So if you click on that banner and just go through the steps online, that's how you do the initial application. If you do have any queries or any issues when you're going through that, my email address is pgt@auckland.ac.nz, and do feel free to get in touch, even if you're just wanting to chat over, you know, to say, hey, there are a few different master's options and I'm not sure which one would be the best for me. Really happy to chat with students about that, because sometimes, you know, you do need a little bit of steering in the right direction as well. Applications for semester 2 do close in July. I'd always recommend, if you are interested, to get an application in as soon as possible. It's just good to have that peace of mind that you know that you are confirmed on the program when you do want to study. We do also have applications that they're open now for semester 1 next year. So if you are thinking a little bit further into the future, it's never too early to apply for a program. We are processing those applications at the moment, so you're welcome to apply now for whichever semester you'd like to study in, or to get in touch with us if you would like to have a chat about any of those options, how we need it structured, funding options, any of that sort of thing. So I'll have a look now to see the question box. It doesn't look like we do have any questions that have come through so far. One question I'll just start off with, in case anybody is interested, that we get quite a lot, is how do I know the difference between a 120 point or a 180 point master's program in terms of eligibility? Look, if you're not sure which one you're eligible for, if you make an application for either of those programs, we will assess that application holistically. So if you are not eligible for a 120 point program, but you are for a 180 point, or vice versa, we will get in touch with you to let you know that there are other options. And we will do the assessment of your GPA as well. So if you're not sure whether you meet that GPA, there is a calculator online, but if you just apply to us, our admissions department will do that GPA assessment, so you won't have to figure that out yourself. Just got one come through here. Any advice for the selection interview? I'm assuming that that might be talking about a selection interview for one of the teaching programs, in which case we do have some information online about how you can prepare for those interviews. Our main advice is, sorry, if this is for one of the teaching programs, our main advice is that you do try to get out there to do a school visit, just get an idea of what it is that you're applying for, what it's like to be sort of on the other side of the classroom. So that would be our main advice if you're asking about the selection interviews for teaching programs.
And just to add to that, if you're talking about the programs that we've talked about tonight, so the master's level programs, there are no selection interviews.
This is about student visas. If you have queries about visas, I would recommend send me an email. We have a department that looks into visas that I can either help with or refer that to. Generally, you will need a student visa in order to study in the semester that you've chosen. Yeah, but if you've got specific queries about that, do feel free to send them through to me and I can either answer those or refer them on. Thank you. As I said, the session is being recorded, so if there is anything that you do want to go back over, we will be sending out this recording, so you will be able to go back through it if you do wish. And again, if you do have any questions or you're wanting to chat through your options, anything like that, please do get in touch with us. We're always really, really happy to talk to students. And apart from that, thank you so much everyone for joining, and thank you to our lovely panelists as well for joining us tonight. Have a great evening, everyone.